giving you the information you need. This is Inside the News. Here's Guy, Ben, and Frank.
Welcome back to our next segment of Inside the News. Frank Vernuccio, Ben Brunson. My name is Guy Wehman, and the program is Inside the News, heard all around the country on our various affiliates, and we love them so much. This is our international segment, and we've got nuclear threats, and we've got a lot of things going on. But I want to follow up on something that Ben brought up before we get into the nuclear threat here, and that is what is going on in Europe. He mentioned Meloni coming in and watching the inauguration, and she being totally on board. Remember, in the photo op, she was the one who had to get to string Joe Biden back into the picture when they had the big summit, because he was wandering off into some field looking at who knows what, an ant farm probably. Okay. But Ben, I want to talk about Keir Starmer, because this is a serious problem in England, in the United Kingdom. And then we talked last week about Romania. And Europe, as we once know it, is not the same Europe, is it?
Well, let's get very blunt about the issue that Europe faces. They've got serious economic issues because they have driven the cost of energy up to 3 times higher than it is in the United States. Germany in particular has pretty much destroyed their economy because the cost of energy is so high, specifically related to the fact that they shut down all their nuclear power plants and don't have alternative energy sources. But the other issue destroying Europe is unfettered immigration, Islamic immigration, African immigration into Europe. And the specific issue that Meloni is leading the way on is she's the first major European country leader to run on stopping immigration. She has had mixed success, unfortunately, so far, because she kind of faces her own issues. If you're a leader with that message and you're in the EU now, you have the EU fighting you every step of the way, and that makes it problematic in your ability to. It's kind of like being the governor of Texas and trying to stop the flood of immigration across your border when Joe Biden's in the White House. It's very difficult to do. And that's the issue that Meloni faces. Unfortunately, the Brits elected Keir Starmer. They've essentially had a uniparty running Britain for the last 15 years, because the Tory party became what the Republican Party was before Trump, a uniparty. Very little difference between the Tories and the Labour Party. The one Tory leader who came along, who was actually a conservative, Liz Truss, only lasted a handful of weeks in office because her own party rebelled against her conservative ideology, trying to right the ship, trying to lower taxes in England and revive their economy, talking about a free trade deal with the United States. All that led to rebellion by the Tories against their own leader. So the result is they now have the Labour in charge and Keir Starmer, and he's as left-wing as it gets. He makes Joe Biden look like a conservative, and they are in a world of hurt. They have the economy is faltering mightily. They're talking about new taxes everywhere. They have unfettered immigration into the United Kingdom, and it is turning the United Kingdom into a Islamic caliphate in front of their eyes. They have one leader out there, Nigel Farage, who I think is capable of running the UK and turning it in the right direction, a la Donald Trump. He runs the Reform Party, and the Reform Party is quickly wiping out the Tory party. I think that is the one hope, but unfortunately, under the parliamentary system, it also makes it difficult to change course with a new party coming along. So Europe has a world of issues, and hopefully Trump will help nudge Europe in the right direction. If he can if Germany can get under the control of the AfD, they have a hope of turning it around. But right now, the German economy is shrinking, and the hopes for Europe as a power force are shrinking along with it. The future of Europe is Eastern Europe. We've said this many times because they have conservative leadership in Eastern Europe right now.
All right, we've got to bring in Frank Vernuccio on this. You know, Frank, there are people from the United Kingdom over here watching the inauguration, and they said, this is what it's like to be free. And it kind of harkens back to 1776 with the Declaration of Independence. Frank?
Yeah, many years ago, I interviewed Daniel Hannan, who was a member of the European Parliament. He represented Southern England, I believe. And he mentioned how when he talked about what the people want in discussions with the European Union, they kind of laughed at him and said, what does that matter? Basically, the European Union is an arrogant organization that cares absolutely nothing about the wishes of the people. They are a group of elitists who simply have their own ideas of how to run things, and the people, frankly, be damned. You can talk about regulations that make no sense at all. The European Union at one point decided to regulate the shape of bananas that could be brought into the continent. And I believe it was Hannon that said something along the lines of, there are people out there who are really suffering on serious issues, and you're worried about the shape of a banana. The European Union, the European countries as a whole have taken a bad turn. The arrogance is unbelievable, and the will of the people means absolutely nothing. Ben brought up, and rightly so, how Germany is self-destructing itself. Particularly their energy policies and so forth. There is no real representation of the people at the highest levels of European governments at this point in time. And the point that they looked at the United States and Donald Trump with such a reversal of the Biden policies is something that I'm sure gives them some hope. But it's going to be very difficult because of the parliamentary system for them to duplicate what happened in America. But there are a lot of eyes throughout the continent who are looking to America with hopeful eyes saying, maybe, possibly, we can do something like that.
And Trump's position is so strong and he is so positive, and they've watched the turn of this country from, it's easy when things start slipping in as gray, and it starts to slip in as gray, but when it turns totally black and wipes out the sun, and then all of a sudden the sunlight comes in, how bright it is, just even a little bit, it kind of blinds your eyes. It's like that little iris there, that opens up and all. Well, this is not a photography class, folks. This is the United States of America, because this is the golden age. The sunlight is coming in, and it's going to be freedom for all. Thanks so much for listening. We're going to take a time out. We'll be back. Welcome back to our next segment of Inside the News, and pretty much we go into some leadership and domestic issues on this segment. And we've got Frank Vernuccio, Ben Brunson. My name is Guy Wehman. We are looking at a lot of the nominees we mentioned in our first segment, talking about Kash Patel and Lindsey Graham, and Pete Hegseth will probably be nominated. It looks like that is going to be confirmed, and all down the list. Pam Bondi, she is a star in the Republican Party, and she's coming out of Florida, and she's got a lot on her plate running the DOJ. Cory Booker started questioning her on the Bureau of Prisons. Well, we saw Steve Bannon, he was in there. Peter Navarro, he was in there, and they saw what is going on. We don't know exactly all that's going on behind those walls, folks, but there's enough word coming out that even Pam Bondi in the discussion with Cory Booker says, yeah, I want to investigate some of the corruption that we've heard about in the Bureau of Prisons. Frank?
The problem is during both the Biden and the Obama administrations, corruption was sort of a byword. Remember, one of the real differences we see with a Republican administration is that they tend to look what's good for the country. The Democrats tend to look what is good for the Democratic Party. In many cases, that involves putting people who are unqualified into considerably important positions, and they don't really care that they don't know what they're doing there, as long as what they're doing helps out the Democratic Party, provides no-show jobs, provides jobs for incompetents who are resting there while they put together a war chest to run for office in the future. So I think that's going to change in the next 4 years, and I think that involves just about every agency of the federal government.
You know something, Ben, and you talked about this when Trump was signing the executive orders. He signed it about getting the J6ers out, okay? And he says, I'm going to sign these, and I want these guys released. After he signed that, he gave it to one of his guys in the Oval Office. He says, here, take this on over because I want them out. even the morning after, they're still in. They're suspending that order and they're just kind of holding back on it. Maybe this is some of the frustration they're talking about.
Well, look, let's start with the issue of corruption. You know, if you're cheating on your wife, you typically don't call out your friend who's cheating on his wife because you're guilty of the same thing. Under the Biden administration, you had the Biden crime family. It's about as corrupt as you can get, earning tens of millions of dollars from the Chinese, more money from Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs. Clearly, a business model where they put the family access to Joseph R. Biden up for sale, and it paid off. And you had to have one of the last pardons signed by Biden in office was to pardon every family member he had. Hunter Biden got the publicity, but he pardoned every family member. So when you're that corrupt, there was almost no discussion of corruption or focus on it whatsoever during the 4 years of the Biden administration. So the fact that you have someone like Pam Bondi coming into the DOJ, and you've got the Bureau of Prisons underneath the DOJ, you actually, I think, have a clean slate to start to dig into these issues, dig into corruption wherever it occurs throughout government. This has been a theme on our show for many years, the impact that the Clinton level of corruption has had on Washington, D.C. in general. It's been a bipartisan issue. Well, it's time to really attack that. We just had, this family, the Biden family, removed finally out of power. So all of a sudden, Hunter's, paintings are now worthless, of course, which they always were. But we can attack this issue, and that needs to be on the agenda. I'm not saying that's the highest issue that Donald Trump and the Republicans face. I'd put things like voter reform well above that, because that's an ongoing core fundamental issue that this country faces. But someone like Pam Bondi can make her name by really digging into the issue of corruption wherever it's found, and within the DOJ and within the Bureau of Prisons, to have someone who can go after it with a clean conscience, which she has, is very important. So look to that to be part of the hallmarks of the next 4 years.
Ben, you mentioned something, about, all the corruption and that Biden is finally gone. Well, in many sense, Obama is finally gone as well, because that was a connection, which leads into the next topic of who's actually been running the country. Biden has been signing these executive orders by himself, and he doesn't even remember who or what he's been signing. And that came out with Mike Johnson here, Frank. And so it's like, will we ever truly know who was running the country in the last 4 years?
I tend to doubt we'll ever know the intimate details of it at this point in time. But the fact of the matter is, it was clear that there was no leadership from the White House. Joe Biden was frightened of answering questions, probably didn't know the answers, even if he wasn't frightened of answering them. I'm assuming a bunch of 30-something-year-old ultra radicals were running the country. You look at some of the issues that were tackled by the White House and the views that they had on them, the paths that they took, all seem to mirror exactly what the hard left wants. And again, go back to something I said earlier in the program. The intention of a good elected official is to do what's good for the country. But in the Democrat Party, it's always what's good for the Democrat Party, the country be damned. And you can see that most clearly in an area like California, where the good of the people is totally ignored. A system has put in place of ballot harvesting, which ensures that the Democrat Party always wins. In essence, the political system in California mirrors pretty much what goes on in a communist country, where the Communist Party is the ultimate. You have an elected official, but that doesn't really matter. He's just the face of it. The commissar, the Communist Party representative, is the one that really counts. And in the old Soviet army, you had generals and majors and sergeants, just like you have in every other army, but it was the political commissar representing the Communist Party that made the real decisions. That's what goes on in California. That's what was going on in the Biden White House. It's something we really have to fight to prevent. We can talk about the changing the voting laws in places like California. but we really have to make sure that we never run into a situation like that again. And part of the problem is that the media didn't take its traditional role in saying, Mr. President, in case Joe Biden, you don't seem to have a grasp on the issues. Who really is making the decision here? You know darn well that if that was a Republican in office, the media would have pounced on it, but they chose not to during the Biden administration.
Okay, Ben, you got 45 seconds.
I'll make a prediction. There'll be a book probably by Bob Woodward in conjunction with Jill Biden or Kamala or someone like that, that'll actually give you the real story of what went on the last 4 years and who was pulling the trigger. So I do think there'll be ultimately some light shed on the history because it's too juicy a topic not to be tackled by somebody like Bob Woodward. So eventually we'll know. But it's kind of irrelevant at this point. And to Frank's point, the key thing is stopping the Californianization of from that model from spreading beyond the borders of California, because it has destroyed that state. Hopefully we can isolate it to one state.
All right. Coming up, it's the Brunson files, and much feared too, but much looked at because people go, what's on his mind? We've got Frank Vernuccio, Ben Brunson, myself, Guy Wehman. We're going to take a time out. We'll be back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.